Hi everyone! So welcome to this quick tutorial just walking through some of the details of how to assemble your storage tote. So the dimensions of your finished bag are going to be, so this side where we have the ties, this is the part that you have the pattern for. So this side is going to be about 15 inches wide. And then on this side, the depth is about 13 inches. And then the height from here to the top is about 11 inches. So this was the size specifically that worked in my shelves. It made it so I could have two right next to each other and use as much of the height as possible. So that's the dimensions that this bag makes, and I find the size is really great for, it's big enough that I can store a lot in it, but you can certainly adjust the pattern to whatever size your shelves are or the size that you want. But just to note, that's what this pattern is going to make up to. So first you'll find the pattern, which you can download and print. It's printable on 8.5 by 11 paper or A4. So once you have the pattern printed, we can start talking about our fabric. So the fabric I used for both of my totes is actually a home dec fabric that I found at IKEA. It's a heavier weight, like decorator type of fabric. I think denim would also be really, really cool. I kind of was like in between making a print versus denim because I love denim. But ultimately I liked the prints that I found in this fabric. The other thing is you'll notice one side of my bag has a color. So what happened is I actually ran out of fabric. So because it's fully lined, so you cut, you basically make two bags and then you sew them together along the top. And so I found that I was just a bit short on fabric, so I grabbed a cotton poplin that I had in my stash and I just cut one of the sides out of the color, and I actually really love it. I think it's such a cool little pop of color. So it was a good mistake. So you could certainly use alternating fabrics and get creative. But that's what I did. I think the exterior works best with a heavier weight fabric, like a home dec fabric or a denim or something like that. So for yardage, if you want to do the entire bag in one fabric, you're going to need about 1.25 yards or 1.25 meters. I bought 1 yard of this fabric, or 1 meter, sorry, and that I was short just this little bit. So 1 meter you'll need a little bit of extra, but 1.25 meters, 1.25 yards will be just fine for the bag. Then for interfacing, so I tried 2 different types of interfacing, which you'll also need about 1 meter of whatever interfacing you choose. So the first one, this bag, I did in this really, really heavy weight interfacing. Literally, I just went to my fabric store and I said, what is the heaviest interfacing that you possibly have? It's fusible, so that's really good. So this one made the bag really nice, have a really nice structure. The second bag, I wanted to try something different. So I used an interfacing that was just a little bit less heavy. And so you can see it's just lighter weight. Still fusible, but this gave me a little bit of a floppier style bag, which I don't like quite as much. So if I were to do it over, I would definitely stick with the heaviest interfacing you can find, and that'll give your bag the proper structure. Okay, so now once you have your pattern printed, if this is your first time working with PDF printed patterns, I'll just quickly walk through how you assemble this. So this has only 5 pieces, so it's really simple to put together. If you think about it like a puzzle, you basically just follow the little design we created here to piece the pieces together. But first, we're going to take all of our papers, so they're all fresh off the printer, facing the same direction, and I'm going to cut the top edge right along the line. So I'll just cut all of my papers right along that line. And then I'll do the same along the right-hand side. So I'm cutting the top and the right-hand side off of all 5 of the pieces. So once you have your individual pieces trimmed at the top and the right-hand side, you'll just follow the little map and assemble your pieces, taking each of the triangles and matching them up to form a diamond. And so at the end, you're gonna have a big sheet that looks like this, and that is our pattern piece. So also I should note that these, I've allowed for 1/4 inch seam allowance on this pattern. So you'll be working with a fairly small seam allowance just to keep the bulk to a minimum. So now for cutting our fabric. So we are gonna need to cut this particular piece on the fold. So you'll see the fold line on the left. You'll need to cut 2 for the outer bag and then 2 for the lining. So it's actually, we'll need 4 of the, I'm calling this kind of like the bow piece. So 4 of these, the pattern pieces, 2 for the inside and 2 for the outside. The other piece we'll need to cut is this piece that goes down the side, down the bottom, and up the other side. So all this is a rectangle of fabric, so it wasn't worth making an actual pattern piece for because it's pretty simple to cut. So in order to do this, the sides and the bottom, we're gonna need to cut 2 large pieces of fabric with the dimensions of 37 inches long by 13 inches wide. So you'll need to cut 2 of those strips, and that will give you your pieces for the side and the bottom. Then for cutting our interfacing, so what I did was with my bow pieces is I took the pattern and I cut the interfacing. It stops right here, so right below the bow, because I want the bow to be kind of a bit floppy and easy to tie because that's what gives me my handles. So I literally took the interfacing just here, just to the top. That's how I cut it. And then on the long side and bottom piece, I interfaced the entire piece. So I interfaced only the outer pieces, not the lining. So just 1 layer of interfacing for the whole bottom and then 1 for each of the sides. So the sides end up just being kind of a square, the bottom part of this, and then leaving the bows nice and soft for your handles. Now let's hop over to the sewing machine and take a closer look at how we get these pieces sewn into a box. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is match up one of the sides of my bow piece, so the handle side, match up the side of that with one side of my long piece. So this is the long side, this goes all the way. So this part of our long strip is actually going to be the bottom of our bag. So what we're going to do is just start from the top. This is the very top of our bag, and we're going to sew all the way down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to stop right here, just about a 1/4 inch from the bottom of the bow piece, and we'll do a nice back stitch here. So we'll just sew the seam, kind of matching up the raw edges, my 1/4 inch seam allowance there. So you definitely want to do your back stitch here at the start and when we come to the corner. Okay, so as I start coming to the corner of this is my bow piece, I'm going to just do a back stitch at about a 1/4 inch from the bottom. And I'll just do a really good back stitch there, a couple like 4 stitches back. And put my needle up and pull this out. And now what I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm going to trim to that stitching on my lower side. So we'll just go right in here. Can we see that? Let me see. Go here, and we're going to trim this bottom layer right to the stitching. You don't have to trim it too much, just get right to the stitching. And then I take my bow piece and I flip it around, and this is what's going to form the bottom of our bag. And so my corner is now looking like this. So I've just flipped it around and I'm matching up these raw edges now as best I can. So this is creating a square. So now all I'm going to do is start where my last stitching ended. So right at that point where we backstitched is where I'm going to drop my needle, and I'll do another good back stitch there. Now you can see my edges aren't lining up completely perfectly there, which is because this seam allowance on this side was not quite even. So I am totally okay with that. This is just a storage bag and I'm not gonna worry. So this bottom, I'll do just a little bit more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance here in the bottom, but that's fine. And I'll just do my back stitch right at this corner again, and sew all the way down until I get to the next corner. Okay, so now as I come into the next corner, I'm going to do the exact same thing and a stop about a 1/4 of an inch from this edge and backstitch. All right, and take it out. And I'm going to do the same thing of just clipping the bottom layer to my stitching so that I can make the pivot around that corner. And then I'll pivot again. So now you'll see that you have a box forming. And then I will sew down this side. Okay, and then what you'll have now is it's kind of hard to see, you will have an actual box. So then you'll just repeat that same exact thing on the other side to complete the box. So once you get your outer box sides sewn together along the 3 edges, you'll want to do the same to your lining. And one of the things I want to note, as you're sewing these sides together, it can be a little tricky with the heavy interfacing. I found it a little bit cumbersome in my machine, but what I found was, even though I was not perfectly exact on the seam allowance, sometimes I had a little bit of a bigger seam allowance, you don't even notice. These are super forgiving. So just, so don't be too hard on yourself if it's not perfect. It doesn't need to be perfect. So then what you want to do is take your lining piece and your outer piece and match them right sides together. Then what we're going to do is start on one of the long edges. So the non-tie edge. So here, this is where I'm going to leave my hole. Actually, it's this side I did. This is where I'm going to leave the hole to turn the bag inside out. So I'll just start here, and I can start here and sew my pieces together, right sides together, all along the raw edges. So you'll sew up the ribbon down along this side, and then up and down these ribbons on this side as well, coming all the way here and stopping, giving yourself a good, a good sized opening in order to turn this inside out. So once you have them sewn, you'll turn this inside out. It is a little bit tricky with the heavy interfacing. I found my interfacing got kind of crinkled once because you have to really like turn it into a ball in order to get it to flip inside out. But all I did was just take it back to the ironing board and press it again, and it kind of got crisp again and nice and smooth. You'll need to do a bit of clipping around the tie. So around this part where the tie comes down in the center, you'll need to clip this seam and maybe some of the curves to get it to lay flat. You'll press this whole thing and you can top stitch your opening closed. And if you'd like, you can continue the top stitching all the way around the top of your bag to give it a nice tailored finish. Then all that's left to do is tie up your handles. And you can kind of play with these, tying them tighter or looser as you want. And that gives you your handles. And then it's really easy to grab and go, and you can fill this with whatever you'd like. So I hope this walkthrough was helpful, and I hope you enjoy making your own storage bags. And remember to tag me on Instagram so I can see what you've created. I'll see you next time. Bye.